General question first. According to an earlier recording, you said all physical beings enter having agreed to forget what you're here to remind us about. And so, did I misunderstand? I mean,
you come forth not intending to remember the details of your former experiences, because it would detract from the focus of this experience. And this is the leading edge where you all are. So remembering how you felt in earlier times would be counterproductive to your ability to attract here and now. But you were born with a guidance system to help you remember who you really are.
Okay.
In other words, you want to know who you really are. You want to remember that you're powerful and that you are love.
Well, I understood that we don't necessarily know that. We have the guidance system, you said, but we don't have the innate knowing that that's the path we're supposed to take. And then we kind of get sidetracked with religion and politics and the world as we know it.
Well, we think that it is the world that is so intent on leading you that is the detraction. In other words, think about it. You're born as this eager consciousness who just can't wait to explore and conclude. And there are all these others clamoring around you, wanting to guide you in your conclusions. And that's just fine, because that's all part of the platform from which you will reach for new thoughts. But rumbling beneath all of that is this soul, or this energy that is really you, that is optimistic and that knows well-being and that knows the eternalness of who you are.
Okay, if we know this deep down, why isn't it so apparent? I mean, I guess you're here because it's not really working. I mean, we're all these spiritual seekers, and it's like this deep knowledge is sitting there. We listen to what you're saying, and it obviously resonates deep within us because we respond to it. But my question is, I was under the impression that when we're born into the physical, we forget it, and then we have to relearn it. And my question is, why are we doing that to ourselves?
Well, we hear this from people often. They will say, Leslie, if I've got this right, I come into the experience, I feel really good for a while, then other people sort of beat it out of me until I don't trust myself or anybody else, and then I croak. Or then I figure it out and I feel good for a while. I practice the art of deliberate creation, and then I croak, and then I reemerge again to start all over again.
Right.
And we can understand why it looks that way. But really what is happening is you're coming forth as this knowing being, that the variety is going to inspire your individual desire, and you know that your environment has the ability to satisfy that desire. And the reason that we are interacting with you is because we want you to be consciously in on your own joyous expansion. Your expansion is a given. We think that man is not as lost as man speaks. We think that there's much more joy happening than many are acknowledging. And just like the recordation of your history, we think that the recordation of your media and the recordation even of the books that are published is a very vast distortion of what most people are feeling. Look at the new babies when they come forth and just ask yourself the question, what do they know? And notice that they have forgotten about teeth and brushing them. And they seem to have forgotten or are not ready yet to walk or speak. In other words, they have forgotten, it seems and is, the stuff of this physical human environment. But then ask yourself, what have they remembered? And watch them. They seem to have remembered that well-being abounds. They seem to remember to be joyful. They seem to remember how to smile easily. They seem to remember to trust. They seem to remember, and that's the thing that we want you to start focusing on a little bit, about what you recall, who you are, and what you know when you are born is everything that you need to know to thrive. You are born with a sense of self and a sense of wanting self to feel good, and mechanisms to bring it about in that way. Jerry, for years, has contemplated what would a natural child be? If a child could come forth and not be influenced by environment, what would a natural child be? And we say, A natural child would be a happy child. But by your standards, it would be a very backward, even uncivilized child. You want to teach it the things that you've learned about your environment. And all of that is part of the evolution. So we don't ever want to make it sound like we think that your evolution is not serving you, because it certainly is. We think your ability to move about with ease serves you. We think the fact that you're not all needing to be out there figuring out where you're going to get your next meal affords you the opportunity to have this stimulating conversation with us. In other words, we think the evolution of your time-space reality is conducive to a much more joyous life experience. We don't think that it has to be one or the other. And let's talk about this for a moment. You're reaching into some places that are new, and we want to receive the benefit from it. So your environment where you stand, or the environment into which you were born, is the platform from which you will launch new desires. Those and all of those around you. And people are dying out of one end and being born into the other. So there's this constant dilution of knowledge that's being left behind by those that are dying and being gathered by those that are coming in. There's also this dilution of pessimism by those that are dying that's being replaced by optimism by those that are coming. And so there seems to be a human question about, well, when do we get it right? When do we have enough knowledge that we've gathered that we can impart to the new ones that serves them? And when can we get rid of the beliefs that don't serve us? When can we get it right? And we want to say it's always right. Because there's always enough of a mix that anyone coming in can have exposure to experience to give birth to his individual desires. It's like saying, what are the perfect ingredients in a kitchen? And we say, well, any chef will tell you the more ingredients, the more perfect the kitchen, because the more opportunity to create from variety. And so that's the way we see this time-space reality, the perfect creative environment where genius creators who understand well-being and who are born into an environment that will give you the expansion you need in terms of understanding your platform and being born with the connection of the true knowledge of who you are, that as you feel for it will leave you in the place of receiving all that you are wanting. It seems ideal to us.
Okay. Well, in the children, you're right. The joy is just so overwhelming that it's infectious. Everyone feels it when you're around a kid. Why isn't it able just, you're not told how to breathe. You just do it. Why isn't this similar to that?
Well, you're not told how to feel. You just do.
Right.
You have those emotional responses. And so we think the question you might
But being able to read it and understand what that means to me.
But you see,
we need this conscious interaction.
It's been taught out of you to some degree. This is what we were talking about earlier. Those who seek to control you don't want you to trust your own feelings. They've actually brought so many of you around to believing that if it feels good to you, it's probably bad.
Well, yeah.
And that's what's sort of gone wrong. You are individually and maybe even collectively now mistrusting or disregarding your own intuitive guidance system.
Why aren't we coming in realizing that system's not working?
Well, the system is working. In other words,
to a degree, but we're all here because it hasn't been. We're not happy with.
Well, let's talk about this. So let's say here's a child born with individual desires, and the child has toys that it is really enjoying and gets them all out at once and brings them all into the living room and is having great fun with them, spreading them all over the place and making a great deal of noise. Now, if the child were there all alone, not trying to socialize in any way, the child could play away to his heart's content, scream away to his heart's content, satisfy himself, and all would be well in his world. But he lives with a mother who, for whatever reason, has decided that this is the day that she doesn't want the house to be messed up. So she puts restrictions on him, and he feels now less free. So that's where it first begins, because when you assume that your joy is dependent upon a particular action, his mother has assumed that. I can't be joyful if you mess up the living room, and I can't be joyful if you make that much noise. So you've got to be different than you are choosing to be so that I can feel good. And he is saying, but mother, you are keeping me from spreading my toys all over the place, which was making me happy, and you're keeping me from shouting, which was making me happy. So your restrictions are keeping me from my joy. So here are two people that are using each other as their excuse for their lack of joy. And that is what it is all about. In other words, that's the dilemma that you're talking about. That's the trouble. In your socialization, you say, you need to be different so that I can feel better. It starts with the very basis of things. And what we're saying to you is, nobody needs to be different for you to feel better. It just has to matter to you that you feel better. So we think that the question that you're asking, at least it's the way we are seeing it unfolding, is, why have we not been asking the question louder and longer about how to achieve our own personal joy? And we say, we think that is the eroding that you're really trying to get your finger on. Why have I as an individual been so willing to set my joy aside for the sake of someone else? And we say, it is because socialization has become more important to you than your individual connection. And what our work is about is to help you to understand that one doesn't have to do away with the other. You can be utterly selfish without stepping on the toes of anyone in your society. In fact, your society would be benefited by someone like you who has discovered that you can make yourself happy without them needing to perform in a particular way. So now let's get back to the basic tenets of religion. Religion says, I need you to behave in a particular way if you are going to join my flock, or if you're going to be part of my group. And if I make being a part of my group look good enough to you, then you might be willing to pay that price in order to join the group. But in that socialization, if you set aside your desire to be in alignment with who you really are, then you've made a choice that is not serving you very well. And we think that is what your powerful questions are pointing toward. We think the question that you are asking is, why have so many humans been willing to set aside their own knowledge and their own feeling of their own connection in order to satisfy someone else? And the answer is just going to knock you over. It's because when you made the first person happy, it made you happy to make them happy. In other words, it felt good to please your mother. Because when she was pleased, she flooded you with a feeling of well-being that was tangible. In other words, it's a lovely thing to be connected to Source. But it's even more lovely to be connected to Source and have someone that you love connected to Source and holding you as their object of attention. It's like a double whammy. And so we think that the reason that people subvert their own connection to Source and try to please others is because somewhere early on in their experience it was pleasing to them to please others. Don't you think that's interesting? So now what you're... Stop that. Don't you know how to behave? So we've come sort of full circle, haven't we? So the answer to your question is, people have been willing to not foster their awareness of their alignment with Source, which ultimately would make them feel good, because they felt the feeling of connection through someone else's connection. And so they are now often reaching for that feeling through someone else's connection rather than through their own connection. If I can perform in the way that you need me to perform, then you will approve of me, and your approval feels good. And I found it easier, many of you say, to get your approval than to consistently maintain my alignment. But ultimately it doesn't work very well very long, does it? Because they are so fickle. They want one thing today, another thing tomorrow. They just make you crazy. And then that erodes your connection because it is ill-fated to begin with, because it's something that is utterly inconsistent. That's how it goes around, isn't it? So I want to feel good, so I please you. And as long as I'm able to please you, then you feel good, and you reflect that you feel good back to me, which makes me feel good. So I've circumvented my own alignment with Source, but I have found a way around it. And if I get very talented and very good, as children try very hard to do, then I can maintain a reasonably happy life for a while. So now let's get back to the heart of your question. Yes, Abraham, I agree with every bit of this you say, but you're still not answering my question. Why is my guidance not so much stronger when I am born that it is impossible for me to ever let loose of it? Why is not my sense of self so powerful and so strong that nothing can erode it? And we say, Your sense of self was powerful. That's why you were willing to go to all of that extent to please others in order to feel good. In other words, that is what is at the heart of everything.